So good afternoon, everyone. This is Jody Patterson, Client Care Manager with Oasis Solutions. Thank you so much for joining us on this Tuesday afternoon to see a presentation of Don't Get Ghosted by Your Fixed Assets. Presentation today is going to be performed by Wayne Austin, Sales Engineer with Sage Software. Thank you, Wayne, for advancing the slide. Wayne has been with Sage Software for about 4 years now, and we've worked together very closely doing webinars and demonstrations of fixed asset solutions for our customers and prospects over the years. This is Jody Patterson. I am the Client Care Manager for Oasis Solutions. We are a company that primarily works with Sage 100 or Sage products, meaning Sage 100 and 500, as well as extended solutions such as fixed assets, HR solutions, CRM, and many others. Next slide, please, Wayne. So a bit of housekeeping before we get started. We are asking everyone to keep their phones muted during the duration of the webinar today. We will have time at the end for questions where we can unmute and ask them on air, so to speak, or if you want to put your questions into the chat window as we go along, we will also address those at the end. We are recording the webinar today, so we can send out that replay to you after the presentation. Next slide. So a little bit about Oasis Solutions before we get started. Last Friday, we did celebrate our 29th anniversary, founded on May 1st, 1991. So we have 29 plus years, or not plus years of experience, plus a couple of years of experience in working with software solutions. We've been a Sage business partner since day one. We've been awarded Best Places to Work in Louisville, Kentucky for the past 3 years running, hoping to make it 4 starting this year. We are also past Incredible Awards winner, as well as have been awarded one of Bob Scott's top 2019 top VARs. Next slide. We are regionally based, work primarily with customers in the areas surrounding Louisville and Kentucky, but we do have over 700 clients in 36 states. When you've been in business as long as we have, you have a tendency to spread out. At Oasis, we do focus on our people and our processes because we believe that who you buy from in the marketplace is more important than what you buy. As such, our team members are made up of former CPAs, MBAs, former CFOs, controllers, and software developers, and our team has over 350 years of combined experience. And with that, we're going to turn this presentation over to Wayne Austin of Sage Software to go through the agenda and the presentation. Thank you, Wayne.
All right. Thanks, Jody. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we're going to be covering a few areas about fixed assets management, and in this particular environment, how you can take advantage of some of the capabilities so you can really keep track of where your assets are. So with that being said, I wanted to start off with talking about just the fixed assets life cycle in general. I'm also going to cover ghost assets, the cost implications with that, and the importance of knowing who has what and where they are. I'm also going to talk about the various components of the Sage fixed asset solution and where they fit into the fixed asset life cycle in general. And I will talk about integration with Sage 100 in particular, but also with non-Sage ERP or accounting software. In the CARES Act just passed, they included some changes that impact fixed assets. So I'm also going to be covering that information. And at the end, we'll leave some time for Q&A. I will also, by the way, be going into the solution to show you how you can capture some of the data that I'm going to be speaking about so that you can ensure that you really are capturing all the details to know where your fixed assets are. So first, let's take a look at the full life cycle of fixed assets. Now, depending on your particular environment, when you acquire assets initially, they may be going through some type of WIP account or construction in progress, or they may be placed directly in service to start depreciation. During their life cycle, you'll certainly need to be doing physical inventories to make sure that you are capturing where these assets are and that they are in fact in place where they should be, and you'll certainly have a need to report on the financials aspects of these fixed assets. And of course, at the end of your life cycle, you'll need to be able to do disposals and be able to capture any gain loss calculations for those particular assets. And the Sage Fixed Asset Solution does have a component that addresses every phase of the fixed asset life cycle. So first, let's talk about ghost assets and financials or money. What do they have in common? The more ghost assets you have, the more money it's costing you. It's essentially money walking away. And I'll go into a bit more details about that so you understand the importance of why you need to make sure you're keeping track of your fixed assets and eliminating ghost assets. So one of the things you'll need to do with any solution you're doing that you're using to manage your fixed assets completely is you want to confirm that the assets you have in your registry are in fact in service where they're supposed to be. Now, ghost assets are simply assets that you have on your registry, but they cannot be found for one reason or another. It could be that they're lost or stolen, or they're rendered unusable, or they've been discarded by some other department or some other users and not communicating that information to the accounting staff. So, of course, this can have some pretty significant financial impact. And let's talk about that for a minute. The impacts you can get from ghost assets are, first and foremost, are going to be taxes. You have them on your books, but you're certainly not having the use of them, but you are still going to be paying taxes for them. You're going to be paying insurance premiums, and they're certainly going to impact productivity, especially if these are critical business assets. And you certainly are not going to be budgeting for replacing these assets because as far as you know, they're actually in service. Oh, please be sure to mute your phone, whoever that is, please. But certainly you want to make sure that they are in fact where they're supposed to be, because of course you won't be budgeting for replacing these because as far as you can tell, they're actually in use. The other side of this is zombie assets. They also do have financial impact because of course someone goes out, buys some equipment, places in service, you may not have added these to your insurance coverage, and you certainly aren't going to be calculating them in your tax liabilities because you have no record of them actually being there. This is also going to impact your budgeting and planning because, for example, if you think you need some essential equipment that someone has already purchased, now you go out and make the same purchase because you don't know it's already there, that's certainly going to have a negative financial impact. If you are dealing with sensitive data that are on IT assets, for example, you want to have a record of every IT asset that's there. So this is a security risk if someone is putting IT assets on your network that you have no knowledge of. So let's look a little deeper in the financial impact. So if you go out to the Sage Fixed Assets website, there's actually a real-time ROI calculator. You can populate your information and see what your particular scenario may be. Now, one of the things not factored here is, of course, productivity, time. So keep in mind that being said, if you do have critical assets that are MIA or missing, that is also costing you money from a productivity standpoint. Okay. Now, by properly identifying ghost assets and making sure your registry is accurate, that's also going to help you eliminate any type of tax overpayment insurance premiums, which this calculator will show, as well as eliminate the potential that things are walking away with or without help from your environment. So if you look at this particular scenario, I'm simply using a total cost of my fixed assets of $5 million. And using 15% of those being ghost assets translates to about $750,000 in cost for those particular assets. But the 40% remaining value percentage, that remaining value cost is around $300,000. So using a federal tax rate, the maximum tax rate is now 21% per business. That is a potential for $63,000 in overpayment for tax for the federal level. And I'm in Georgia, so I'm using 6%, which we have here, which translates to $18,000. Personal property tax at 3.4% translates to a $10,000, $200 in overpayment. And of course, for insurance premium, it's a smaller amount, but still certainly significant. That's a $7,500 potential overpayment in my case. So in just a $5 million total cost for asset scenario, the first year potential savings by just accurately having all of your assets accounted for is $98,700. But feel free to take a look out on our website, play around with the calculator, and certainly take a look at your particular numbers. So let's talk a little bit about the Sage Fixed Asset Solution and how it addresses each of those phases that I talked about earlier in the fixed assets lifecycle. So if you do have CIP or works in progress, or you're doing some renovations, things like that, the planning module would actually handle that, where you can actually manage all of the roll-up costs tied to that and be able to send those assets directly to be placed in service in the depreciation module. The depreciation module, of course, is going to handle all of your tax or GAAP depreciation needs, and the tracking module is where you will actually be able to do physical inventories, stick some barcode labels on, for example, and go out and do those physical inventories. There are many reports built into the solution, and the custom reporting feature actually adds a fully integrated version of SAP Crystal reports that you can build any type of ad hoc reports you need in addition to the standard reports. So let's talk a bit more about the tracking module and where that fits in as far as eliminating ghost assets. So by being able to actually use a traditional scanner or an Android app, attach barcodes to all of your assets. For the ones that are at a physical site somewhere, certainly you can now go out, scan those barcodes, do that inventory, or update any information that has changed. So in the scenario that we're in right now, where you may have multiple remote employees, one of the things the tracking module also gives you the ability to do, especially for things like IT assets, is you can actually check out assets to people, know when they're due back, and actually use a general information field, for example, to capture who is that asset assigned to. And you can, of course, report on that accordingly. The depreciation module also is going to have some general information fields, which I'll show you once I go into the solution. And since it uses the same database as the tracking module, those fields are shared. So if you're capturing the level of detail needed, that's certainly going to be beneficial. But the depreciation module, you will be able to capture all of your depreciation requirements for tax or for GAAP. It also has some great built-in resources, such as an audit advisor, which this example is showing here. How that audit advisor works, you can actually run this at any point throughout the year, and you will actually be able to see any condition that's a potential red flag for you to get audited. So it would generate an exception, identifies the issue, and recommends a resolution, and it's going to actually flag all of the assets that are triggering that exception actually in a group, so it's easy to manage and make those corrections, so that your year end, for example, or by the time you do bring in an external auditor, everything is actually pretty clean in the system. Some of the other great reports that it has built in, you can generate an actual fileable 4562, as well as a tax expense report, which would be used to reconcile this 4562. There's also a great sale of property report, which will actually organize everything in the correct section. Property, there's property tax reports, so it has pretty robust reporting built in, and I'll actually show you that once I go into the solution. So the general information fields I mentioned. So in this world we're in now, where you may have far more people working remotely or decentralized than you normally would, if you take a look at the upper portion, those general information fields, and there are actually 28 general information fields in the depreciation module, and there's all of these 28 are available in the tracking module, and the tracking module gets an additional 12 fields, giving it a total of 40. So what this gives you is the ability to capture as much detail about what your assets are, things like serial numbers, model numbers, if it's tied to a particular project, who it's assigned to, are all important, because when you run your reports, such as a file listing reports or a depreciation expense report, you can sort and subtotal these reports by any of these general information fields. So if, for example, you have 50 users that are remote in a particular state, another 100 in another state, and you need a report of all of your assets broken down by who they're assigned to, for your IT assets, for example, if you have that information defined, you can very easily do that and identify each piece of equipment that is assigned to a particular person or is in a particular building, room number, floor number, all of that information is what you can capture. For example, if someone is leaving the organization, you need to quickly be able to generate a list of what assets are assigned to that person or given to that person. If you're capturing that information, you can easily generate a report with that list of assets and their value, and be able to send that or export that to a spreadsheet or a PDF file and send that off to HR so they know what equipment they need to collect when it comes back. Let's say in this remote world we're in, you have workers that do go on site, for example, and do various jobs. If you're identifying something like what job site is this on, what project is assigned to, you can easily generate a report showing all of the pieces of equipment that went out on that job, and you can verify when it comes back by simply exporting a list of that and having someone confirm, yep, all pieces came back. So capturing the what, the where, and the who are all very important, especially in this remote world we're in, so you can really keep track of where your assets are. Planning module. For those of you that may have CIP, where you've got some various recurring projects throughout the year, this is a module that will help you track all of the realized costs tied to that, be able to report on that, and you can actually report on two sets of numbers, an original budget for the project, let's say, and if you're having some revised numbers or cost overruns, you can actually add a revised budget. And if you look at the graphic on my right, if you look below project statistics, you'll see my actual spend being compared to an original budget as well as a revised budget. So this particular piece of the solution works really great in being able to capture all the reports you may need tied to CIP or works in progress type accounts that can then be placed directly in service in the depreciation module, so thereby avoiding any type of double entry. And on the customer reporting side, in addition to all of the standard reports built in that you can modify within the application, you'll also have the ability to create any kind of ad hoc reports with graphs, access any field in a database, and literally create any type of ad hoc reports you want, because it actually will have access to every field in the database. So let's talk a little bit about disaster recovery. We're approaching storm season and how this can actually impact you. Within the solution, you actually have the ability to attach images, invoices, receipts, and so on. And if you are, in fact, keeping track of the physical locations of these assets, if one of your sites gets damaged or destroyed by some type of event, you can easily generate reports or pull all of the list of assets that were at that site, and having digital copies of things like invoices or a picture of the assets, it's certainly going to make filing an insurance claim much, much easier. So definitely one of the good features to include in your disaster recovery plan. And here's an example of an asset detail where I have attached an image of the asset. You can also attach invoices. Essentially, if you can scan it or take a picture of it, you can attach it. It does support multiple file types. If you have a fleet of vehicles, you want to keep track of your maintenance records and invoices, you can attach them here, for example. If you've got equipment that are going to multiple sites, you want to take a picture before it goes to ensure that the condition it was in, you can absolutely do that as well. Let's talk a little bit about integration. Since many of the customers with Oasis are using one of our Sage ERP systems, Sage 100s, this actually has a pretty seamless two-way integration with Sage 100 as well as Sage 300, Sage 500, and some other Sage ERP systems. For those of you that are using non-Sage ERP systems such as SAP, Oracle, QuickBooks, whatever the case may be, custom integration is available with those various systems. But also keep in mind that as far as something like your journal entry, you can run your journal entry natively in the Sage solution. It's exportable to CSV format, standard Excel, so multiple formats, so maybe no custom integration is needed because most accounting software will actually import a journal entry, for example, from a CSV file. This is an example of the integration between Sage 100, where that general ledger posting reports is actually pulled by Sage 100 for easy month-end journal entry in Sage 100. In the case of those of you who are using a non-Sage product that may need to import it, when I go in the solution, I'll actually run you the report and show you the export option so you can see how easily it would be to actually export that general ledger posting report and import that for your journal entry. Let's talk a bit about tax updates. Now, we typically update our solution with all of the tax rule changes each January. Now, if there are mid-year changes, we have the ability to react to that, so no problem there. We'll also sometimes do a release in the September-October timeframe with any feature changes. This screen that I'm displaying is actually captured from in the application, where if you go to Help and What's New, it's actually going to show you what tax rule changes are included in the current release, and you can actually, it is interactive. So for example, I could click on that section 179 expense deduction and see what the limits are for the current fiscal year as well as past years. So in our case, the section 179 limit has increased by 20,000, so it's now $1,040,000. But if you look below that, you can see the tax extender updates include all of the changes from the Further Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2020. So all of the tax extenders tied to that are also included. You can also look back at past years. So for example, changes that were pushed out from the TCJA 2 years ago and the rules surrounding bonus, that's all viewable in this screen. Now, in the CARES Act, they actually included a technical correction to the TCJA that now includes some changes for qualified improvement property. So let's talk about that a bit. So what that change has now allowed, those qualified improvement property that you were taking 39-year depreciation on can now be treated as a 15-year bonus eligible property. And I've included some further details because actually we have a collaborative site. It's called Sage City, where our support folks are on it, our developers are on it, and most of our users are also on it. So it's a collaborative environment where you can share information. So we actually have some blogs posted out on Sage City with full details and different use case scenarios that might give you some ideas of how you want to take advantage of these new changes and how it may impact your particular business. So if you go out to sagecity.com, you will be able to actually search and find information tied to the CARES Act, for example. So very useful site. And if any of you are interested in seeing more details about this, Jody can actually send you a PDF version of this presentation so you can actually read through the details a bit more. Now, I'm going to take a few minutes and actually go into the solution so you can get a better idea of some of these features I talked about that's going to help you handle your fixed assets. So I'm actually going to go into the depreciation module first, and I'm going to jump into one of my asset details where I can share some information that we talked about. So if you take a look at my general information fields here, these are all customizable. So this is where you're going to capture things like your GL account info, a description of the item. If you're using asset tags, you can populate that asset ID number, and certainly things like asset classes or any subcategories or even things like property tax category that you may need. So in the world of IT assets, you'll certainly want to capture things like serial numbers, images of the assets, and you can certainly attach invoices, receipts, and so on. Let me actually go into one of my computers. And you can see in this case, I'm including a serial number, who it's actually assigned to. And under the Images tab, in this particular one, I've got an invoice attached as well as an image of the asset. Now, you can easily link a single image or invoice to multiple assets. So if I order 20 computers on a single line item, for example, I can link that invoice to all of them quite easily. So again, this is helpful in disaster recovery, but it's certainly helpful if you need to access any information tied to assets you purchased on a single invoice. And let's take a look at how you can customize these fields. So if I go into field customization here, you can actually change the display name to anything you choose, and I can use any of these fields to sort or subtotals my report, or I can certainly search for any asset tied to any particular person based on that field. So if I go back to my list view and I want to find all assets that are assigned to a particular person, and I'm using a field to define that, I'm going to actually go to that field, and I'm going to say, let's find any assets that are assigned to me, for example. And so these are all assets that are assigned to me, so I can easily select them, and I can generate a report showing just those assets. Now, I can also run a report such as a file listing report if I just want a quick view, and I can actually sort and subtotal it by who it's assigned to, asset class, or any field. So for example, if I'm going to use asset class, I could certainly sort by who the asset is assigned to, and I can do this up to 3 layers deep. So I'm going to go ahead and actually run this report, and I'm going to sort it by who it's assigned to and subtotal it. Now, many of my assets in this particular sample data do not have someone assigned, but for the ones that do, it will certainly show it that way. So now if you take a look at this report, these are the ones with no value assigned, and if I go towards the end here, I'll simply back up where you can see these are all of the assets assigned to this person, okay? And it will give you a total. Will you please mute whoever that was? And you can see here all of the ones assigned to Wayne. Now I could just run it for the asset assigned to a particular person, or I can sort and subtotal it by any of the users. So definitely take advantage of capturing as much detail as you can so that you can easily identify where your assets are. Now I will talk about the difference between this module and the tracking module for doing physical inventories in a few moments. But one of the things I do want to point out, the depreciation, of course, has all of the books you need for doing depreciation for tax, for GAAP, state, AMT, or ACE. And of course, there's 2 custom books which you can rename or disable any of the books you're not using. And in the case of the tracking module will have no access to these book fields, so there's no fear of anyone accidentally doing anything to impact depreciation. Now, let me actually show you a couple of those reports that I talked about. I'm going to actually run that 4562. And this will actually generate a fileable 4562. And if I was actually depreciated to my fiscal year end, this would actually generate the schedule that goes along with this. And all of the reports, of course, are exportable. And as I mentioned as well, there's a really good sale of property report. That's going to break everything down in the correct section, property. $12.45, $12.50, and so on. And it's also going to capture all of your ordinary gain losses. And all the reports in the solution are exportable. So let me actually take a moment and jump over into the tracking module, because I do want to show you how that will help with the physical inventory side, where you will be able to use either an Android app where you can actually push out an inventory list, or to a traditional scanner, use the camera to actually scan the barcodes, update information that's changed, and be able to even take a picture of the asset and send that data back to the tracking module so that you can then, of course, complete a physical inventory. And just so you can see an example of what those barcodes may look like, you can certainly have something like this, but you may include things like company name, company phone number. That barcode is what translates to that asset ID number, so that when doing a physical inventory, you can actually capture the right information. So it is going to know which particular asset details you're actually looking at. Now, this feature that I mentioned, that you do have the ability to check out assets to people, I actually do have some assets checked out in my company. So when I open the company, it's showing me here that some assets that have been checked out are overdue. I can say, yes, I want to see that list, and these are the assets here. There's actually a report you can run if you are using this feature, so I can see the details of who actually has these. So it will actually show you the asset ID number, description, when it was checked out, who was checked out to, when it was expected return. So this would be something you could easily use for your remote users if you expect that they're going to be using this laptop for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever the case may be, and you can easily generate a list of everything that's checked out to someone using this. And this is something that could be managed by staff outside of the accounting department. So for example, if you've got IT staff or asset managers that may be involved in doing this, you could easily do something like that. So let me actually go into an asset detail here. So if you notice, there's no access to the book fields, so there's absolutely no way for anyone actually using the tracking module only to be able to impact anything depreciation-wise. It will have any images or invoices you have attached, because it's actually using the same database as the depreciation side. But in addition to those 28 fields from depreciation, there's 12 additional fields that you can certainly use for capturing other information. But all of these fields can be renamed anything you choose. Simply type in the display name you choose, and you can actually capture that detail, change the order in which they're displayed, and that way you can maximize the level of detail that you want to capture for your particular assets. Now, with regards to actually doing these physical inventories, once you've actually completed a physical inventory, the outcome for the accounting folks that's going to be important is being able to identify those ghost assets. So I'm going to run the reconciliation report for the last inventory I did, and the end result is what you need as far as eliminating those potential negative financial impacts. So if you take a look at this report, it's going to identify assets not found with the status of N, anything found with no changes, status of O, anything you made changes to but were found as status of C. But by far, what's really important here is these with a status of not found. It's going to tell you the tag number, what it is, and the fact that it's missing. So these would be your ghost assets that you're overpaying on taxes, insurance premiums, and of course, they're either lost, stolen, or otherwise unusable, and you're carrying them on the books. So this is what's going to be important to you with doing those physical inventories. And you'll probably want to do that, especially now that people are more decentralized. You want to make sure you actually do know what you have are supposed to have, so when everyone do return to working back in the offices, you can reconcile that information to make sure everything is actually, in fact, there. Okay. I'm going to go back into the depreciation side here. And I want to show you some of the helpful information I talked about as far as being able to see what is going on as far as, go into the other version here, what is going on as far as your assets that are impacted by any kind of tax rule changes. So first, let's take a look at that, help, what's new, and then click on learn more. And as I mentioned, I can actually, it's interactive. I can click on the section 179, for example, and I can now see what are my 179 limits for 2019, 2020, and so on, okay? Or I can look further back if I want to see what were the previous changes tied to the TCJA, for example, rules surrounding bonus depreciation. All of that's available in the solution. So for those of you that, for example, may have qualified improvement property that you're currently taking a 39-year deduction, you can actually make changes en masse. So if you have 20 or 30 assets that may meet that requirement and you now need to make a change to those multiple assets at once, you can actually do that for any books. I can create a group identifying those assets or search for them and identify them, and I can actually now change that estimated life that were currently 39 years, and I can change that en masse to take advantage of that 15-year change. I can also change depreciation methods from anything to something else. So if, for example, you want to change some assets to remaining value over remaining life, I could certainly do that. But I just wanted to take a look at the estimated life change. So on the next screen, you can also choose how you'd want that to take effect. Do you want to change the past and make the change back to the placed in service date? You actually have the ability to do that. Or do you want to just make the change from the current depreciation through date going forward? So if this has been in service for 3 years so far, let's say, and you want to make the change from the current depreciation through date forward, that way you don't have to go back and do an adjustment, you absolutely can. So you can make the change however your accounting practices really would account for that. So you can actually do that in either scenario. And it's actually a great way to be able to do that, where I can change depreciation methods or lives for any books for any number of assets in one shot. You also, by the way, want to try and leverage, taking advantage of everything that can possibly benefit your organization more. So the other thing you can actually change en masse is if you need to be able to change your 168 allowance, your bonus percentage, you can actually change that on the fly for an individual or any subset of assets, or even across all the assets in any fiscal. And because all of the tax rules are built in, it will only allow you to make the change of assets that do in fact qualify. So it's a great tool for making sure you're getting the most financially out of your fixed assets management system. And if you do exceed 40% of your assets being placed in service in Q4, and you do need to make a mid-quarter convention switch change, you can actually do that as a global change, switch from half-year to mid-quarter convention. So it's got a lot of great resources that actually will help you take advantage of the best you can as far as how the rules apply to your particular organization for your fixed assets depreciation. Now, I did want to show you that journal entry, that general ledger posting report that I mentioned, that you can, if you are in fact not using a Sage accounting software and need to export this to a CSV file or standard Excel, you can simply go ahead and run this general ledger posting report, okay? And all the reports are exportable in multiple formats. So depending on what system you're using and how it can import your journal entry, you can select CSV if that'll work for it, or standard Excel or Excel data only. And all of the reports, as I mentioned, can be exported to Crystal Reports, PDF, and multiple other formats. But in the case of this general ledger posting report, which you would need for your journal entry, most systems can import that from a CSV file. So if you're using a non-Sage ERP system, that's how you would likely do that. And if you do need to see some more details for your specific environment, feel free to reach out to Jody. I'll put actually her contact information up as we end, and she can schedule a demo for your particular organization so we can go through the particular details that you may need. So with that, let me go ahead and pause and see if there are any questions.
How much? Oh, boy.
I'm not sure that that was a question for you, Wayne, but
first, and then
no. Whoever that is, can you mute? Okay.
So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat window. If anybody has any specific questions for Wayne at this time, please feel free to unmute and speak directly to him, or you can enter into the chat and we'll monitor that for a few more minutes. Don't see anybody raising their hand or unmuting. Give it another minute or so. My contact information is listed on the screen right now. I am Jody Patterson. My email address is jody@oasisky.com. As Wayne said during the demonstration today, Sage Fixed Assets does have native integrations to all of the Sage accounting systems, and we can help set those up for you. We also have customers that use fixed assets with other ERP or accounting packages, not Sage in the Sage family, so to speak. So Sage Fixed Assets truly is an ERP agnostic or accounting system agnostic solution for fixed assets tracking. As Wayne also mentioned, we are seeing an uptick right now in businesses needing fixed asset solutions now more than ever, since the workforce has been dispersed due to COVID-19, as they were issuing out laptops and computers and phones and things for individuals to take home. They needed more visibility into who had what assets and where they were physically located as they were dispersing them from the office, so that they could make sure to bring them all back. And as they were doing that, they were finding that didn't necessarily have all of the equipment and assets that are currently on the book, thereby representing those ghost or zombie assets, ghost assets. Wayne, again, what was the difference between a ghost asset and a zombie asset?
Sure. So ghost assets are the ones that are actually on your registry, but they're missing, MIA. They've walked away for some reason, or they've been discarded and no one's committed that to accounting department. Zombie assets are the opposite, where someone may have gone out and purchased some equipment, especially with IT assets, for example, placed them on your network, so you have the liability of having them there, but you are not including them in your registry, so you're underpaying taxes and you don't have them covered on your insurance policy. So there's a different set of liabilities there, but both scenarios are certainly very important to your business operation.
And especially in the disaster recovery areas, those zombie assets are not on your books. You don't know about them, and your insurance doesn't cover them. You may have difficulty getting those assets replaced if you were ever to go into a disaster recovery situation. We will be sending out this presentation to everybody that participated or even registered, so you have my contact information as well as the slide deck. If you want more personalized information about fixed asset solutions for your business, please don't hesitate to contact me directly. I look forward to working with you. Wayne, thanks again for the webinar.
My pleasure.